I mean, he's really, I mean, if you give that guy nuclear and he's around, you don't know what he's going to do.
Okay, so fortunately, Ahmadinejad is not in charge of Iran. Now, the guy who is, the supreme leader, Khamenei, has said for the last 15 years since he took over from Khomeini that Israel's a cancer that needs to be eradicated, and they've supported virtually all the suicide bombings in Israel and the bombing of the Jewish Community Center in Argentina.
Right.
They blew up a base in Saudi Arabia, Khobar Towers, U.S. base in the mid-90s. There's a U.S. indictment that actually says this. They are dangerous. The government's track record, the revolutionary government's track record in Iran is actually much more cowardly than the rhetoric. Whenever they think there'll be consequences, they have a tendency to back down. And they've used Hamas and Hezbollah, Arabs actually, to do the dirty work. In other words, not Persians. They pay the money, they train many of these people in Iran. And they've gotten away with it so far. But when they get worried, they get more cautious. The Russians do not really have to fear the Iranians using nuclear weapons because they're probably not quite that stupid, but they are still very dangerous. They blew up our peacekeepers in Lebanon, and they blew up the French peacekeepers in Lebanon as well.
How is this going to affect our oil right now? I mean, with all this going on, we get a lot of oil from Russia, right?
Well, the market's fungible, but they're basically the second or third largest exporter of oil.
I mean, we're talking about, we're worried about digging for oil in the United States when, I mean, they're always talking about biofuels and all these new things, but that's a decade away. I mean, maybe 10 years from now. We need to think about ourselves now. I mean, it's good that we're going to be working on research, and it's good that we're going to be green eventually, but right now, we don't have the time. You know, we need the oil. It's affecting people's jobs. It's affecting everything.
So there's no solution for it. Everyone gets up and say they have one solution or other. I found the Paris Hilton video very funny, her campaign video very funny, everyone's circulating it online. But seriously, there isn't a solution to this. We have high gas prices. There's a lot of factors having to do with the Chinese economy, the Indian economy. They could change. There appears to be effective speculation.
But I'm concerned about our dealings with Russia right now. I mean, the problem is that, you know, they've been our enemy, but then again, we've needed them, you know, as our friend. They need us as well.
They need us a lot.
For exporting, import, we're a global economy. You know, so what do you think is going to happen with Georgia, the pipeline? I know they're cutting the pipelines right now, and
so the only reason that
does the United States have to worry?
Well, no, not really. In the larger scheme of things, the only reason the Russian economy is really functioning is because oil prices hit over 100. It was at 140 at one point. This is a very incompetent, dysfunctional economy. Not as bad as Iran, by the way. Iran has power outages through most of the country, which is extraordinary because it's actually a smaller country with a lot of oil. So even though Russia has historically had incredible engineers and computer programmers, they have an extremely dysfunctional economy, as they've had for 100 years. And under Putin, there's been a lot of abusive but damaging meddling in economy. He's giving the companies over to his cronies, just like the Soviet communists almost. Maybe not quite as bad. The Russian economy is not very functional. Today, the country is much wealthier than before, of course.
But they have a terrible health care system. People don't live up to a certain age, you know, especially the men there. It's a very bad system of government right now.
This is not a sustainable thing.
And so the Russians should be really working with their allies, working with everybody to to get green, to do everything together. But at the same time, they're more interested in, to be the world's power again.
It's a very misplaced priorities here. Their military spending is not so smart. In either there are some similarities, interestingly enough, even though Russia likes to consider itself advanced economy, it really isn't. There are actually similarities between Iran and Russia. A little bit unfair to Russia in the sense that Russia does have some world-class companies, sort of, and Iran really does not. And they have exports other than oil and natural.
And they have a lot of American companies. I know with McDonald's is up there, and a lot of American companies are up in Russia as well.
The Russians lead the world in rocketry in certain technologies related to jet engines and avionics. In theory, they should be able to be competitive in some of these industries, and they're trying. But there's a lot of problems in their economy. And also, one of the issues about Georgia is it's probably going to boomerang against them to a certain extent. They have very long borders. They have a very long border with China. They're not so far in the Pacific from Japan. In fact, there's a little disputed area with Japan, although they have the islands and possession is half the battle. That's a little dispute that goes back to World War II. They border a lot of countries. Turkey has the second largest army in Europe, and it borders Georgia. So nobody's really going to trust the Russians. And
what is the relationship between Georgia and Turkey? How is their relationship?
You know, I don't know. I assume because they're both American allies, probably pretty good. I don't think that the Turks would, just for the heck of it, antagonize the Russians. But the relationship.
But that pipeline is important. The one that goes to them from Georgia.
And the Turks don't
it's so
trust the
interesting that
Russians.
everything comes down to oil, doesn't it? It seems like wherever we look, it comes down to oil.
I don't think so. I think that we are seeing what we've seen the Russians do for hundreds of years, attempting to bully the countries in their area. And unfortunately, I think that sort of the way things were done in the Russian Empire, and even more so the way things were done in the Soviet Union, have kind of stuck with the Russian psyche, that they haven't gotten over this idea that you kind of that everything is a fight. And while in the rest of Europe, clearly there is a feeling of a single Europe. There's the desire to have, a single European currency, which you have in many countries.
And global economy. We trade, and everybody, seems to get along pretty well together.
When you rip off foreign investors, as they did with UCOs, how do you really expect that you're going to guarantee continued investment in Russia? Now, right now, they have a surplus of money from oil. This is going to change. Their oil actually dropped in the past year, about 2%, just a little bit. But maybe part of it is to divert attention. What is going on with their oil? There's a lot of incompetence, and also it's a very complicated science.
Are they running out of oil? Or
everyone's running out of oil. But it's a very complicated science to extract oil, to figure out how much oil you have. And especially if you screw up things, you make it much more difficult to get more oil. If you do things too fast or sloppy, this has occasionally happened in countries like Russia. And so we don't really know. I mean, they can screw it up. Even if they have lots of oil, they can basically not invest enough and then have to invest a lot or not have oil when they want.
Well, you say that it's not about oil, but everything we were talking about comes down to oil. Somehow oil is everywhere. It's about, a lot of our people thought that we were in Iraq because of oil. I mean, we know that Saddam Hussein had a I wonder if he was still around, what would have happened today?
Well, with the high oil prices, but that's what made Saddam Hussein dangerous. What everyone forgets today is that on the eve of the first Gulf War, he'd actually come in within months of having nuclear weapons. We discovered in 2003, of course, that he didn't really have a nuclear weapons program anymore, even though he was acting like it. Although if oil prices hit 140 and the sanctions probably fell apart, he probably would have had a nuclear weapons project again. That's what made him dangerous. The problem, oil isn't the only thing that imports in the world. The problem is you give a lot of oil to thug, Ahmadinejad, Chavez, quite frankly, Putin. And suddenly they think they're big shot. Basically, this is giving a lot of money to dysfunctional countries. And it's not really hurting us as much as we sometimes think, because we can afford to pay these prices. The problem is that the money is being spent on terrorism, in the case of Iran. It's being spent on trying to revive imperial aspirations for the Russians. And given the fact that they're not entirely really fixing their economy, and we have the most advanced economy. And, there's other countries that are around the same category as the United States. We're okay. We are the richest country in the world per capita GDP, with some very small countries as exceptions, like a couple of very, very small ones.
Well, I would like to see our oil prices, even if they're increased, support at least a national health care program and colleges, like some of the other countries that do have high oil prices and are using those prices, the tax of those prices, to support some things for their citizens, in their country. And I see that we're coming to a close. And Michael, we never got to the economic analysis of your other show, because we're really, right now Russia is we can is number one right now because of what's going on in Georgia. But I want to welcome you back. You know, come back to the show so we can finish up the second part of our show. And I'm right about Michael. He's a human encyclopedia. He knows everything. And again, Michael, thank you for coming on the show. And when I need your assistance, believe me, I will call you to get it. Thank you very much. And I hope that Georgia and Russia can resolve.